Hi everyone, so today I will be discussing some of my favorite passages that I found in Metaphors We Live By, and it's by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson. And okay, I guess I'll get started. So the first passage that I found to be most interesting was on page 5, and it started with arguments and wars are different kinds of things, verbal discourse and armed conflict, and the actions performed are different kinds of actions. But the argument is partially structured, understood, performed, and talked about in terms of war. The concept is metaphorically structured, the activity is metaphorically structured, and consequently, the language is metaphorically structured. And so the first little thing that I did was that I like to look at the similarities in between, because when you think about it, arguments and wars, they both involve this planning process. It involves the development of strategies, with the arguments being creating these points to properly defend your argument, and in the place of war, there's usually the person in command that has to think of strategies in order to bring victory upon their team. And that's kind of what I was thinking about that. And then I also like to look at the differences because, well, when you think about it, they are both completely different things. War is one thing, but arguments is another. They can be used in completely different sentences and completely different situations too. But ultimately, I found that the common ground is that they had this connecting idea altogether that involves having these defense mechanisms in a way. And even when I was looking at the word choices, I found the particular phrase partially structured. And when you think of that phrase, you can also think of the concept of it being unfinished, that the argument, although, however, it may be structured, it still needs work. It's not yet completed its intended purpose in that sense. And that's what I got from that. And even in the last sentence, with the repeating phrase, metaphorically structured, you can see how it's repeated 3 times. And that not only is a pattern revealed, but it presents the idea of a system being in place. The things that are following, they are things that are following a certain order. And in this case, it would be from the concept to the activity into the language. It's following a straight path. And that's what I thought of that. And then on page 13, I also found another passage that I really liked, and this was the final paragraph. It said, on the other hand, metaphorical concepts can be extended beyond the range of ordinary literal ways of thinking and talking into the range of what is called figurative, poetic, colorful, or fanciful thought and language. Thus, if ideas are objects, we can dress them up in fancy clothes, juggle them, line them up nice and neat, etc. So when we say that a concept is structured by a metaphor, we mean that it is partially structured and that it can be extended in some ways, but not others. And I first acknowledged the way the authors use personification in the way that they describe the ideas as dolls or figures that can appear to look a certain way, but it all depends on the certain angle that you're looking at them at. So that's what I found to be interesting too. And then I also found it interesting how they were implying that although a metaphor can branch out in any particular way, it will always be to some certain extent because it will be masking also this part of the communicative process. And I think it said that on page 11 too, and that metaphors can be tricky to use, but like although they help us interpret things that are difficult in other circumstances to understand, that they also blur this part of the thought process, that when it comes to understanding this part, you're also losing the communication process that is in between too. And what I mean by that, by there being this lost part in the communication process, I mean, well, when you think about it, is the whole message being transmitted, or is only a certain part being sent out? And yeah, that was pretty much it. And overall, I think it was a very good read. I liked it for the most part. I especially liked that part with the apple juice seeds. That was actually a very interesting way to look at it too, because as I said in my last video, when you make it a personal example or something that you can relate to or something you can understand easily, it just makes it easier to understand the things too. And yeah, that's pretty much it.